right, everybody, welcome to Risk Takers Unleashed. My name is Michael Greer, and I'm here today with my guest, Michele Baker. Michele is a professional in the film and TV industry. She works typically on the production side. She is a very talented location scout, does numerous production activities for many productions that we would all know and love that come through on our TV broadband streaming ecosystems that we all subscribe to. I'm going to let Michele get into some detail on all of those interesting productions. But Michele brings something a little bit more to the conversation. Like so many smart, interesting people that I know, I would categorize Michele as really a musicologist, someone who can really hit, I think, a level of critical discussion points on music that kind of transcend what the art form actually is and kind of bring some real introspection into all that. I love that stuff, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, anyways, Michele, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for having me. Thank you for helping me get my Chrome together.
The computers are endless fun. I think we can all agree that they're just a joy to have in our life, and to be, what, basically a kind of maintenance relationship that we have with all of our fun gear and toys. So I don't
Yeah,
know. I think they say that if you are serving the product, you actually are the product yourself. So maybe that's where we find ourselves at this point. I don't know. I
here,
don't know.
here. Yes, yes. Well, it's serving us well now, so here we are.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, um, I think working in film production, TV production is it's immensely interesting. I think it's one of those career paths that almost chooses you as much as you choose it. I was hoping you could kind of talk about how you got into this line of work. I don't know that at like 8 years old, you're sitting there thinking to yourself, like, I'm going to work in film production. It's not something you think about or know about, but it kind of like brings you in, almost, to use the Godfather line. You keep trying to get out, and it keeps dragging me back in. But talk about your journey and how you kind of got into all this stuff.
Sure. Well, so I'm the youngest of 10 kids. I think that's a big part of the story because 10 down the road, I had TV all and music all around me since a very young age. Apparently, I was singing songs before I was talking, according to my
Awesome.
brothers and sisters. So animated, sort of, imitating commercials, was something I would do for as a joke with friends as a little tiny kid. So all that stuff was swirling around, in our little limited TV world that we had then. And being the youngest of 10 kids, you basically get your ass kicked, pardon my French. So
Yeah,
I was
all
built
good.
for the movie business because it's like now I get my ass kicked in the movie business. And you said location scout. I'm technically a location manager. So it's a word, but so I'm in the Directors Guild
Yeah,
of America. So I'm a DGA location manager.
yeah.
I was, swirling around after college doing video editing and co-producing and making educational videos and, drug relapse prevention videos and, all these fun little things. And then eventually I started to work on movies, and right away, there was a movie upstate. I grew up in upstate, Hudson Valley region. There
Yeah.
was a movie upstate. I was a production assistant on it. And from that point on, it was like, oh, okay, there's some action. I was
Yep.
seemed to be built for it. All the work that I had done prior to that sort of led me to be able to talk to people, have conversations. I was interviewing kids in desperate situations, so I sort of led myself up to being someone who could communicate with a lot of different kinds of people,
Yeah.
and that quickly showed itself, revealed itself, to work in the film business. So I very quickly got into the location department and
Yep.
was the location manager almost straight away. I do and have done scouting. That's a little bit of a different thing. That's cool. But generally now in my world, I'm hiring scouts and I have a department working within me. So if you're not filming,
Yeah.
on a qualified sound stage, you're using practical locations, and you need that's where I come in. You need a location manager to find them, so you work very
Yeah.
closely with the director, the director of photography, and the production designer. So you're right there with the key creatives trying to find what they're looking for. So that part is
Yeah.
really exciting. It's
Yeah.
you're right in the heat of it. You are with, all the people that are going to make the look of that film happen. So it's a big role. It's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
And it's what else am I going to do? It's cool, like you're in all different
Yeah.
environments. You're not always looking for nice things, you're looking for rough things, you're looking for everything in between. So from someone who grew up in upstate New York,
Yeah.
where I started out working on movies, I knew all the neighborhoods. So I would find places up there because I knew everything up there. But being down here in New York, it's a whole different ball game. Um, so you see so many things that you would not have really found in New York otherwise, unless you were
Yeah.
looking, or you're down that block, or you're in this basement or whatever. And
Yeah.
that's kind of magical, being anywhere, having that experience, that
Oh yeah.
reminds you of what you do. Yeah. Sorry, it's going off on that.
Introduce Junie. What's who's
Oh,
your
you hear
assistant?
little Junie
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my little rescue dog, Junie. She just got a
Uh
haircut. She was not expecting to be on camera, but she's definitely more camera ready than I
she's more than
am.
welcome. Camera ready is a state I never actually seem to achieve either. So it's kind of, you get on and you're like, what's going on here? Yeah, it's I don't know how this stuff happened, but
Yeah.
woke up and found out I
Um,
was 57 years old one day.
hey,
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
I'll take
That's
it.
pretty good.
I'll
Yeah.
take it. I don't know what the over under was 20 years ago on me hitting 57, but I'd have taken under.
There
So
you, so it's a
yeah,
win. It's a win.
nothing but win at this point. So, listen, I mean, I think that's you bring up a lot of interesting things. Talk as much as you can, and I know a lot of this is can be confidential in nature, especially current
Sure.
productions. Talk about the productions that you've worked on, or if you can share things that are in progress for you now, just so people have a sense of a context of like, hey, here's what I'm helping to produce.
Sure. So, things that I worked on. So, I work on TV and I work in film. Right now, I'm working on a feature
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
film. We started filming in December. We're on hiatus, or at the
Yeah.
moment, we start back up in January.
Yeah.
It's nice to be on a feature. I like to switch. TV is its own beast, but
Yeah.
that's episodic and it's very different pace. A feature is nice because you're working with one director, throughout that film. Whereas the TV world, it's like you have guest directors, and so you deal with a showrunner. So there's something a little more personal about a feature
Yeah.
film. But um, that movie is called Baby Girl. Can't
Mm-hmm.
say too much about it, but it's
Mm-hmm.
in progress right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's TV shows were like Russian Doll season
Yeah.
two, HBO's Divorce season one. I was one of
Yeah.
the managers on. I'm just trying to think of what people might have seen. Julianne Moore won her Oscar on a very small independent film called
Yep.
Still Alice, which was a very small movie with a very large, well-known cast. So challenging. Forgive the dog. And what else? Mr. Robot season four,
Yeah. Yeah.
and feature films like, geez, what have I worked on? Well, the original thing that sometimes people always talk about is Super Troopers, which seems to be some,
Yeah.
cult hit. That seems to be sadly, my Citizen Kane. When my assistants work for me, they're like, "You did Super Troopers?" And I'm like, "That's the one I get all the cred
Yeah.
for,"
Yeah.
But that's another film. I mean, it's crazy. You're in all kinds of places, upstate.
Yeah.
Obviously, I did a lot of upstate films from working up there,
Mm-hmm.
and smaller indie feature films to start. I cut my teeth on indies,
Yeah.
um, not knowing any better, just like being the whole department, doing it all. And this was pre Directors Guild days, So I learned a lot in those indie environments. Like it's you
Yeah.
don't have much to work with, so you have to have a personality because you're like, I can't give you much, but I'm going to give you myself, and I'm going to give you what I have behind me, which is like a bunch of people, coming into your house to film, and so you had to kind of sell the idea of it then, prior to. Now in New York, it's like, how much are you going to give me, But in those indie upstate environments, it's like, oh, a movie, So you have to go with that a little bit because the payout isn't as much as it usually can be. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, like Russian Doll. So like Russian Doll season two, tough show.
Mm.
Major New York. We did part of Russian Doll season two was a period piece, so you were dealing with the '80s, and that was what, a couple of
Yeah.
years ago, post COVID, trying to find little slices of New York where
Yeah.
you could get an '80s vibe in
Yeah.
there. So because it went back in time, then it also did a lot
Mm.
of work on the subway stations. So like
Yeah.
the subway was a whole big part of the show.
Wow.
Some little nerdy cool thing is I and others in the crew, we had to take, because we were working with the MTA on the subways so much, we had to take like a track safety class, which
Yeah.
was the coolest thing ever. Like it's one of the cool moments of my job was taking an MTA track safety class where they take you out on the tracks. They teach you about like getting into the niche of the subway. So you have to stand there while a subway goes by you.
Yeah.
Like, what could be better than that? I have my official subway car, like track safety class, which I'm like,
Nice.
track safety, but it's a silly little thing, but it's a little
Yeah.
New York thing that you get to experience, that you would have no other reason to be doing that
I know you
unless
don't
I
touch the
worked.
third rail, right? Isn't that one of
And
the
you
rules?
go, don't touch
Yeah.
that third rail, brother. That's why I'm still alive. But
Oh my
that's
gosh.
just a little moment in time. But like, it's
Yeah.
those kinds of things that um, you remember when your job is stressful otherwise,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of expectation, but it's little
Yeah.
moments like that where you just have that little reality of what you do, and that it is pretty badass and unique.
Yeah.
And I don't know what else I'd be doing. What would I be, like, a wedding planner? I could plan a wedding for like 35 days, but would I want to? It's the
Yeah.
thing.
Right. Yeah. Somewhere a wedding planner dreams of getting into film production. I think maybe more than a few,
That's
and
right.
so
That's
yeah,
right.
I
But
mean,
this-
it's kind of you mentioned something I actually had never thought of, which is this idea of, because I was thinking your mind is probably like a Rolodex of locations, and upstate New York better than most. You live in Manhattan and life in the city, so you must literally walk around and like capture like visual vignettes in your mind of like, oh, that would be a cool, or I don't know, you're on Canal Street and there's just a look of like, that's what it looked like in the 80s. I never thought about the temporal thing of production where you're trying to, because I mean, obviously you can build sets if there's unlimited budget and fake it in that way, but it's probably better to kind of cheat a view of an extant street scene that just looks and feels 80s. But I can't imagine how you like save all of this resident like information. I mean, your mind must be like a Rolodex. I don't know if you have a system for that, or you're just that may be the talent that you bring. How does that work?
Well, I have to give a lot of credit to my location scouts, because there's one scout in
Yeah.
particular I work with as much as I possibly can. His name is Wing Young, and he's
Yeah.
a friend at this point. I've worked with him for
Yeah.
years. He's a true Rolodex. Like, he's like,
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
Wing, I need a such and such. And he's like, what about boom? I'm like, oh, and he'll start you there.
Yeah.
He'll start the ball rolling. So as location scouts, that is kind of, they have tons of files and tons of, just
Yeah.
because they've been all over, like New York scouts, so
Yeah.
those people really have it. But yes, to answer your question, I'm always in a place like, oh, this would be cool for
Yeah.
filming, or this could have some visual, because there's a lot of things you need to know and to look
Yeah.
for, and space is one of them.
Yeah.
You need more space than you ever think you do.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so even if it's like, oh, even if it's a church, you're like, oh, this would be good for catering, or whatever. Your
Hmm.
logistical mind is always working. And
Right.
like, oh, I wonder if I could, do that, or where would you park the company.
Yeah.
So yes, you're constantly in that state of finding, or if I'm out of town, I'm like, oh, that's a cool location. I'm in
Yep.
like Dallas,
Yeah.
seeing a concert. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, that's a cool spot. So yeah, that never seems to shut down.
Yeah.
And then there are times when you can't find it, and somebody wants something that feels unattainable, and oftentimes
Yeah.
it's like it is, and so you're trying to get that look. And we cheat a lot of things, a lot of different states, and so you're always kind of trying to see what you can get away with, in the state of New
Yep.
York or New Jersey,
Yeah. Right.
because if you're in one, you're using that tax incentive, so you have to create a lot of looks
Yeah.
oftentimes. So
I'm sure the
uh,
financial piece of the puzzle and the permitting process and all this is a whole other like kettle of fish. And there's probably its own kind of like artistic approach to just like, yeah, there's 8 places we could shoot it. This would be more cost effective or easier to gain the permit or whatever. Like I can't, the complexity must be high, minimum
Right.
at a
It
minimum.
is. And like the last thing, we joke about this sometimes, the last thing you say in front of a director or someone like that is, oh, this place, they have a great load in, or like, the staging here is great. They're like, nope, we don't want it. People generally want the most difficult, challenging load in,
Oh, hello.
Manhattan. Yeah, work, Manhattan.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
from a girl who grew up upstate, I definitely learned a lot from being here in Manhattan and working in Manhattan, because you're forced to work here. Like you're forced
Yeah.
to be parking trucks on the streets. You're permitting for with the mayor's office. Like it definitely toughened me up a little bit, in a good way, not a New York tough way, but in a way I
Yeah.
probably needed. So it did make me stronger, I believe, just as a person and as someone in the world. So I think
Yep.
that it was a good thing, to have come here. I did a lot of work upstate, so I was doing it okay up there for a while, but then it got to the point where New York was the way to go. So, and that's what got me in the DGA.
Nice. I think
Mm.
it's, I mean, I too have been coming to Manhattan for years and I think it's changed so much, but I think you must see it kind of in a different way when you live there where it evolves, weekly, monthly, kind of like into the thing. Junie's like, yeah, no, New York is like she's got feedback for us on this.
Yeah, seriously. See, now you're hearing the audio all right, Mike? Junie,
I'm
come.
hearing the
Sorry.
audio. Yeah, the mic is working. Yeah, we just had like my whole system melted down. So if we look like I had to lose the cans, I lost 2 monitors here. It's been a technical challenge today, I think, to say the least. I mean, my goodness, if we get this thing done, I mean, gold stars to both of us really at this point. I mean,
Seriously, seriously.
it is that. Yeah,
Well,
I am. Go ahead.
you talked about New York changing, and it certainly has. And it's
Yeah,
changed
yeah,
for the good and for the better. Like for the worse, I definitely noticed New York has changed and has a different feel since COVID. Times have gotten harder here.
yeah,
For those that make the money and those that don't, it's a hard city to live in. It's expensive, and
yeah,
it's a tough city to work in, but it's a tough
yeah,
city to not have work in. So, it's changed. The air has changed a bit
yeah,
to a time when probably prior to me even moving here, it just seems a little bit different. But
yeah,
working in it, we were talking about like time periods and having to do an 80s time period, and
yeah.
that has gotten harder. Like doing period films in New York has gotten so much harder between city bikes
I'll
alone,
bet.
and those new like plug-in things where you can plug your phone into like this big thing on the street. You have to try to cover them up. There's so many things trying to hide, the period, that it becomes quite difficult.
Yeah,
So yes, we going back to that thought, is we for Russian Doll season 2, we had this little slice of like 8th Street and the East Village, and
yeah,
dressed 5 stores, in a row to look like something else, like a little 80s slice.
yep,
And it's funny because you do all that, you change all these windows, you get 5 people to say yes to you, You want to talk about taking risks. Try just hoping somebody's going to open a door for you, like that's your whole day is hoping somebody's going to meet you with the key, um, but that is harder to find. New York is really tough now, and some people go out of New
Yeah.
York to try to find New York, or you go further uptown or
Yeah.
whatever, you know
It's not just a fix it and post thing, I think, anymore, where you kind of cheat a few things. And because it's I mean, like Hell's Kitchen is a whole different place now
Yeah.
from what it was 15 years ago, maybe even just 10, and it's kind of, so you're, I don't know, I guess you're gaining locations in a way, but you're losing them as well, like at the same time as things get developed and just change. And so it's kind of a moving tapestry for you guys. It's continually, reinventing itself. And uh,
Correct, correct. That's exactly true, because there's a lot of things you can't get and find, or there's just little bits of it. But then, yeah, I was looking at a penthouse apartment, that we're going to be doing some work in. And sorry,
yeah,
there's my phone ringing. And it's a new building. It's something I hadn't been in before. The views are
yeah,
unbelievable of New York. So then
yeah,
there's those moments, where
yeah,
things do have to change and growth comes in, and so some of these buildings are quite stunning. And then you also lose a lot of the charm, a lot of the little
yeah,
like Bowery vibes, and all of
yeah,
that has gone away. But to
yeah.
create them is
Yeah.
tricky.
Let's shift gears a little bit. One thing that you and I really have in common, and I think we've talked about throughout the years, and we have known each other for a long time, by the way. I mean, like since the '80s, I think, which is
Wow.
cool. Um, but I think, for you and for me, like for some folks, the music has been. I'll paraphrase Jim Morrison here. The music has been the special friend. And
Mm,
I think we've had some pretty detailed conversations about thoughts on music, what it means to you. And I think you're in an artistic business, and then to have, I think, any kind of art form that can advise you on the journey, on the pathway, is cool, to have that. And so, I mean, take me a little bit through your kind of musical journey, how you got into it, and like, what were the first records that you bought where you knew like,
mm,
oh wait, there's something here for me. There's something deep, it's I was kind of thinking back to first record concept the other day, and I have two phases of it, for me anyways. One was this I couldn't have been 10 years old. I bought, with my allowance money, I bought like Elton John's Greatest Hits Volume 2,
mm,
and I bought a Beach Boys Greatest Hits thing. And that opened the gateway to me, where I was kind of like, these are, they're great tunes. They're great tunes to this day, both of those records actually. But it did something. It opened up, I think, a gateway for me into a broader dive into music. And then have I think of The Doors, Jim Morrison, as the first real band that I got
mm,
into. It was they had an edge. And that was like I was probably 13 years old where I started really thinking about like there's an edge to Doors music that I think was different from the Elton John stuff, different from the Beach Boys stuff, from the slightly earlier years. And I wonder if you have like phases how you got into it that were like that for you. That kind of, there's like the innocent, like I like music phase, that first one. And then there's the, oh, music can be like part of your personality. And I wonder what band, reflects that for me at this kind of, age 13 is such a kind of transitional age where you get into, you're seeing like there's an adult world out there. Things aren't always, it's not just Santa Claus, there's like a dark edge out there. And but do you have those kind of like milestone, events, or did it progress in a
I
different way for you?
I do. I mean, the thing for me is, again, going into the having a big family. I was listening to music because I had brothers and sisters who were listening to music when I was just a kid. I was not exposing myself to it. I was exposed to it by way of my
Yeah.
family. The
Yeah.
radio was obviously a thing. You knew the song from start to finish because it's a
Yep.
radio track. The outro, the
Yeah.
whole thing, right? And you
Yeah.
hear them all the time. My
Yeah.
brother Tommy was into the Rolling Stones. He was
Yeah. Wow.
into, you know, um, some interesting, more like harder, at that point for me, harder music. I remember him being the one that said, "Oh, John Lennon passed away,"
Yeah. Yeah.
like that little connection to music. My other brother is like, Steely Dan. So I
Yep.
got into that. My
Yep.
sister had, it was a lot of Elton John stuff, and it was, you know, uh, she had, and then there was, because I was grew up in the 80s, so there's also
Yeah.
like the weird 80s music. Like my first concert was Cyndi Lauper, but it's not like,
Nice.
it's not the path I went down or anything. But
Yeah.
those were the records. Like I had a Go-Go's album. I had a
Yeah.
birthday that came, and I got two Go-Go's albums, a Beauty and the Beat albums,
Yeah.
because that was what was going on. um but music exposure to real, like, songs that I'll still listen to, I really
Yeah.
feel like came from my family. Um, you know, Having some of the, like, my other sister was like a Joni Mitchell and
Yeah.
Van Morrison and Stevie Wonder. So like I had some good influences, Melanie, so I had
Yeah.
some good turn-ons to music in that way. I sang Neil Young's After the Gold Rush into like a cassette recorder with my older
Nice.
sister Rita, and I was a kid. So like,
Yeah.
that music came in very, deeply into me and still
Yeah.
resides in there.
Yeah.
Um, Grateful Dead stuff that wasn't in
Yeah.
my family at all. My first
Yeah.
Grateful Dead album was, a cassette, and it was
Yeah.
Working Man's Dead. And,
Yeah.
it was kind of, I could get away with playing it in my brother's car because it almost was country-ish. There was like a
Yeah.
little
Yeah. For
softness
sure.
to it. Um, but that's how I got into that. But I really got into that music because everyone in my high school started going to see the Dead, and
Yeah.
so that was like, oh, what's all this interest? And
Yep.
obviously, eventually, I did too. And I think I was 15 or 16, 16
Yeah.
for sure. But I keep thinking maybe it was 15.
What
Um,
what what was your first Dead show?
it
You
was
you
Hartford.
yeah.
It was a Hartford
Sweet.
show. I want to say it was 85, but was it
Yeah.
86? Like I sometimes get confused. Or I had a ticket in 85, but I didn't get to go till 86 or something like that. But
Yeah.
that was it. And I mean, in that regard, so there's music and the love of music. It's always
Yeah.
been in me.
Yeah.
Music has always been a comfort for me. It's
Yeah.
always been, yeah, it's the one that stays with you. It's a love that you'll always have.
Yeah.
It's a comfort. It's it is your friend. It is your sort of,
Yeah.
companion in life. And
Yeah.
it to me, starting to go to see the Grateful Dead as a young person, I'm a young person. You're figuring out who you are as a teenager. You got a lot going on. You don't know who you are really at that point in your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
You really don't know what's going on. You're trying to keep up with this one or that one. Um, but when I started to go see the Grateful Dead, like I observed, obviously, because it's a scene, right? And
Yeah.
it
Oh
was a
yeah.
total scene, and it was like,
Yep.
wow, this kind of like hippie vibe, whatever, sure. But there was a real sense of community, and what I feel like I got from that, and I don't mean this in some hippie way, but like there was a feeling, I felt the sense of love within those environments. Like
Yeah.
I would feel this warmth,
Yeah.
and a freedom to be who I became, who I am, a freedom to just sort
Yeah.
of not dance or be like this person or that person, but like to find it in yourself. And that freedom of expression was
Yeah.
exposed to me by every single person around me at a show. I was like, oh, wow, you can just kind of, let loose a little,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just kind of like enjoy it. So music has always been that. But then when I found it in that environment where you're like plugging into a live situation, and so everybody's experiencing it, which you just
Yeah.
don't get anymore.
Yeah.
In
Yeah. It's rare.
Even like movie theaters, people aren't going to the movies. Everything is like,
Yeah.
pardon my French, but like masturbatory. It's like your
Yeah.
own
Sure.
thing. And
Sure.
so those shared experiences are like, it is like church. It's a
Yeah.
shared group loving experience. And
Yeah.
I really discovered that that did something for me, and that sort of lit me up, and so those early days, like Cyndi Lauper didn't do that. It was cool. It was
Yeah.
my first concert, but I didn't get
Yeah.
it wasn't that experience, but it was the
Yeah.
experience of, shared music. And some of I'm trying to think of some of the early things that I've seen, that got me even to going to concerts, but it was those early bigger shows. Phil Collins,
Yeah.
like a big
Yeah. Oh
a
yeah.
big like a classical kind of get a seat and be in your in your seat and see a show. But the
Yeah.
Grateful Dead became something completely different. It was a scene.
Well, they are, I think, and as I think about it, it's so I mean, I have a kind of a similar, music resume, concerts and the whole thing, and I was fairly, I think, um indiscriminate as to I would go to. If someone had a ticket or it seemed interesting or whatever, I would just go. And
Yeah.
um I think I like that I availed myself of the kind of different, styles and artists and everything that was out there. And the 80s were such a real treasure trove of like so much stuff was going on, the new wave thing, so I got, like you have Cyndi Lauper and Go-Go's. I'll see you, the B-52s, and
Yeah.
I would go to like Love and Rockets, gothy, weird, just to kind of like figure it out, what is this? And but there's something, I mean, you touch on the Dead, and I think, look, when we're talking about the Dead, is kind of, there's a number of phases and outfits, that the Dead went through. And I think you and I are probably tied into the same outfit. And I think it's important to delineate those eras for not just Deadheads, but when we're talking about music critically in general. There's the kind of early Pigpen stuff, which it to me, it struck me always as coming Allman Brothers, like Gone Awry, like it just, it never grabbed me in that way. The Keith and Donna era, I know for some that's the apex and they love it, and the whole 70s. Um, and there are good shows. I know everyone's going to, you know, point us to 5877 Cornell. I get it. I own it. It's a Betty board. That shit's awesome. But I think for you and for me and for many of, our peers, it's the Brent Midland, essentially the 80s era, right? And Brent was with us, I think, until, what was it, 90 or 91? I can never quite remember, but too brief, certainly. But in those shows, so when you're a Dead fan, I think you're stuck with some burdens, right? And those can be, there's volatility in the show quality. Like, you don't know what Dead is going to show up. The good side of it, financial people define volatility as, variance in downside and upside. And there's a lot of variance in the 80s, depending on states of mind. Those guys were road dogs and up to all kinds of silliness, but there were moments, I think, when the alchemy really came through and the band is just firing on all eight cylinders and it comes across. And I think if you got to experience the 80s Dead at one of those apex moments, you were very fortunate and you saw something, I think, unique in. So, you have to discuss the mastery of Jerry Garcia when you're kind of delaminating this thing. And it's hard to overstate it. I view him really as a generational talent, kind of like Sinatra. And because he's able to create voicings on the guitar that only a true master can manage. He's owning tempo, he's owning the melody, he's owning, the harmonic elements of a song, all the fundamental constructs, and he's able to kind of work with those and work without those, because he doesn't have to. He can, in a phrase, I think, get behind the beat deliberately, so come back into it, speed up past it, and land back on it, just to kind of shade the illusion of time, and then phrase things in ways that so few players can. And I think if you got if you got what he was doing and you got those moments and you were able to kind of, vibe that mastery, it brings what I think is the most elusive element to music for us concert goers and us, super aficionados, which is the joyfulness piece of it. You mentioned like church, and you mentioned the whole idea of it being a joyful experience, and I think that's what guys like Jerry could bring. But it's so rare, isn't it? To kind of like have those moments, and so I don't know if you feel that way. We're definitely going down into the trenches on the analytics of this stuff, but it's important to find those outfits for you. And so for us it was that 80s dead is a huge chunk of that, and for other people it would be different things. But I mean, talk a little bit about the idea of, and you go to concerts still, you're probably one of the most active live concert goers I know, and
Yeah.
you managed to get in it. Like you're in the front row, you're, right there with the band. Talk a little bit about, what that's bringing to you and what your communication level is with the band and how that kind of affects, all those things. A lot in there, but I think you get what I'm
Sure.
saying.
Well, yes, first of all, going back to the Brent and Jerry days, those were my
Yeah.
days. That was where
Yeah.
I figured it out,
Yeah.
and found the joy. That's where I stepped in. I
Mhm.
predated the other folks, and so they are great albums. But yeah,
Yeah.
I would have to say Brent's vocals and harmonies, like man, he
Yeah.
had that beautiful raspy, and
You
yeah, it
did.
was an incredible combination. And
Yeah.
you re, you you long for those kinds of peoples and those kinds of harmonies, when you've
Yeah.
lost them. But so
Yeah.
in those days, I was just figuring it out. I was never in the front row, or because
Yeah.
you had a ticket and you didn't always sit in your seat. But I was never in
Yeah.
the front row or anything like that. I didn't have those experiences, but I had the
Yep.
experience of joy. I had the experience of just laughter and fun. The
Yeah.
idea of like going and having so much fun in those environments, and the ability to listen, to do what those,
Yeah.
like those weavings that Garcia did, and
Yeah.
to discover them, orally, and sort of
Yep.
be moved by them and swayed by them. And you could be like, oh, that show, you got to be, when you went to so many shows, you got to be like, oh, Jerry was off his game or whatever. You could
Yep.
be, say those things and have fun with that sort of stat stuff. But yes, I really learned to sort of listen more and listen to the way the music would weave around, and respect what that is,
Yeah.
so that, like you said, he had the ability to sort of, deceive time, and sort of, and that's a beautiful way to put it. And that's
Yeah.
also what comes to mind for me is it's the thing of time, and that present moment. That
Yeah.
is the most, when I'm, now I'll take it to now, when
Yeah.
I'm in those moments, and in the listening to the music. So it is nice to be in the front row. You don't
Yeah.
have the distraction of people talking and just
Oh yeah.
chomping their ears off, and their phones are up recording. They're not
Ah,
listening, and they're, they've
yeah.
already removed themselves. So the
Yeah.
more people that are behind me, the better I am, the better off I am to really have the experience. And the experience is, you can be in a giant
Yeah.
stadium and get this intimate experience because you're
Yeah.
right there. And that is one of the most exhilarating experiences I've
Yeah.
ever had. It's like some people skydive. It's like, no,
Yep.
I get exhilarated by that. I am watching the music go down. I am
Yeah.
witnessing it. I am a part of it, and so are all the people around me. And it's this incredible moment of like 3 hours of the present moment. I never get it. I'm always looking ahead and what I
Yeah.
had to do, didn't do. Look, so that
Yeah.
groove of like, and that's where I feel like it's that same thing of like deceiving time. Like you're just
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
time space and you are alive, and I feel closer to myself in those environments. I feel like I'm connecting to myself wholeheartedly. I feel like, oh yeah, I'm a badass. I'm
Yep.
reminded that like I have a pretty incredible life, and that things are, pretty beautiful out there in the world, and so
Yeah.
you just have those uplifting moments that the music sort of elevates you to. And it's that shared experience of being right there in it. And yes, you see the looks between musicians, you see what they're doing, why
Yeah.
they're giving each other looks, like it's very intimate. And to feel like you can feel intimate at City Field in New York,
Yeah.
is a hard thing. But it's
Yeah.
incredible to be standing there and you turn around and the entire stadium is behind you and you're sort of like dominating City Field, and it's a crazy, weird, intense personal experience, and it's
Yeah.
so much fun. Like, I just can't believe the fun, and I'm so
Yeah.
glad that I haven't missed out on it. Like, there was a few years where I didn't really go to see anything, after Garcia died and stuff. I tried a little fish. I didn't, you go to other things, but I hadn't really had that experience, and I sort of went back into the mix of it with like Dead and Company, if you
Right.
will. Or
Yeah.
I see Joe Russo's Almost Dead, very
Yep.
very enthusiastic, talented players, but the and people sort of claim the Dead and Company. Yes, it's John Mayer. It's a whole different ball game, but
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
still
It
getting
is.
that joy. And that's the thing about the Grateful Dead songbook that
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
so attracted to,
Yeah.
is that yes, we know the tapes of the Donna and Keith days. We know the Pigpen days. It's this traveling quilt that just
Yeah.
gets woven and woven and woven, and it's comforting. We're comforted by that music. So there's
Yeah.
like this soulful sort of, warmth that you receive from it because it is familiar, and maybe it's
Yeah.
done a little, maybe the tempo is different or
Yeah.
this or that, but it's like, it's that comfort of it all. And you can elevate from that, So that has been the most exciting thing. Like,
Yeah.
I really have a blast doing it. And I'll go alone a lot because, I mean, I'm there to listen anyway. I don't want people talking to me. So I know the
Yeah.
people that are around me generally. So it's like I really am comfortable in that environment. I'm
Yeah.
really at ease. I'm at peace, and it's literally like a therapeutic scenario. I just feel
I get it.
calmed by it. And that, again, that return to self is just an
Yeah.
incredible thing to feel. And it's that live moment of it. You're not anywhere else but right there.
Yeah.
And it's such a payoff. It's such a
Yeah.
payoff. So that's
We talked about, you and I've talked about this before. It brings to memory for me. I used to go to Turkey quite a bit, and you'd see the whirling dervishes there, and they would spin to kind of create this, uh,
mm,
like joyous state in their like religious focus and approach, and it all of it kind of reminds me of that capability to kind of transport yourself to a place of joy, which and the feeling of joy is such a really kind of rare one in this complicated, challenging, difficult world.
yes.
You can have happy and fun moments, but that like pure unadulterated moments of joy that come from what you're talking about. It's the relationship that you're able to put yourself in with the music. I do think there's something about the you touched on a number of bands and eras and things like that, and it really is this idea of I think the jam band context lends itself to that joyous moment happening. I've seen Fish a few times like you have, and I know you just saw him at Madison Square Garden. I mean, I think they can hit those moments, and it is quite possible that you know we preceded them. It took me a while to kind of warm up to Fish, and I finally broke down and went to a show 10 or so years ago, and I got it. It was like, okay, right, and in his own way, I think Trey was kind of able to channel a similar thing that Jerry was doing, because he has that that mastery, that facility on the instrument, and I think he's having fun with the music, and he can relay that to audiences when he's at his best. And it is this kind of like the product is being made every night, fresh, right? And so sometimes it's a
Yeah.
good batch, sometimes it's an okay batch.
Right.
You get
Right.
what you get. I mean, there are bands that ensure a good show by using sequence synthesizers, and they're going to hit the same notes at the same time in that sequence of the show. nothing against that. That can be a lot of fun too, to kind of pull off what they're pulling off. But I think there's you're if I can say, flying without a net, right? When you're out there improvising in a jam scenario, not dissimilar to 50s bebop, right? I mean, they were kind of,
Right.
they had a tune, they're going to cover it, but they're going to do their own interpretation night in, night out. And I think that's kind of such a, kind of interesting approach to it. It's it's I like what you've kind of modeled out, though, in terms of the, you're actually eliminating the possibility of distraction by getting up on the music, keeping
Yes.
the phone in your pocket, the whole thing. It's a big part of it, because you're right. You go to concerts now and people are videoing the whole thing, and you're like, you're not going to watch that. Like, why
Yeah,
don't you have
you're
the
not gonna
moment?
watch it. You're right, you've
Yeah.
lost yourself. You've just disconnected yourself to that chance of
Oh, I know.
feeling something alive, and
Yeah.
people, believe me, like, even in the front row, sometimes you get a phone, like, right in front of you or, like, right at your ear,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
so it doesn't totally eliminate it, but it mostly does, and
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that it's experiencing joy, but it's also, like, you can listen to a Morning Dew or whatever,
Yeah.
you know and you feel emotional, you can feel a lot of things, and I think
Yeah.
that that's also a beautiful feeling too, and that's the beauty of music. It's like sometimes
Yeah.
you want to cry your eyes out, so you listen to a certain song, or you need inspiration, so you dance to this song or whatever. But I
Yeah.
think there's something really beautiful about being happy, and also, like, tears are rolling down your cheek because it's a beautiful moment, and it's real and alive, and
Yeah.
you're alive, and it's just this moment of realizing that, and that it doesn't get better than that,
Yep.
and so those things are, like, I saw Peter Gabriel
Yeah.
fairly recently, in, like, September, at the Madison Square Garden. Incredible show. His voice
Yeah. I'll
was
bet.
phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a performance. Like, that's probably a set list that he goes and tours with, maybe a few
Yeah.
changes, but it rang all the bells. You got the songs you wanted, and they were
Yeah.
tremendous. The stage production. So, love the improvisational jam band vibes, but, like, with all respect to something like that,
Yeah.
when the Steely Dan band, they'll call it, plays,
Yeah.
they're going to try to get it as tight to those albums, which you want. The ear wants
Yeah.
the album, so you don't
Yeah.
want to miss that moment of what in a Steely Dan song, because it's like, it, and you wait for it, and you, like, crave it, so it has
Yep.
everything has its place, but in that sort of improv area where you get to sort of, I don't know, you improv, like, even, you sort of,
Yeah.
like, just flow with it, and it's like that
Yeah.
fluent, it's you move like water, and so it
Yep.
becomes all this, like, fluid period of time, and that's like that's the ultimate to me.
I did think, Mayer had a big pair of shoes to fill, and when he stepped into that, I have to admit I was skeptical, and I think he absolutely pulled it off, and it was such a welcome surprise to see the kind of quality of, what he gave to encode the songs, to learn the songs, and then kind of move past that in that Garcia-esque way of, like, okay, I own the composition, so now I'm going
Mhm.
to break the rules of the composition in an improvisational way. I think he absolutely nailed it in a way that I didn't know that he was capable of. So I have to, maybe I was one of the, like, early naysayers, but it came around, I think, and worked out. But you mentioned Steely Dan. I think it's important to touch on them, and I kind of, Steely Dan's like my, I think, palate cleanser when I get lost in music and I'm struggling to kind of re-engage and find what's the next pathway. I tend to end up back listening to a lot of Steely Dan stuff, and I think my theory on that is, compositionally they are masterpieces. I mean, their canon is so well written and so fantastic, and for some
Yeah.
reason it stays alive. And I know you and I are both fans, and I'd love to hear kind of your take on it. You're right. Like, you go to see them live, and they're going to deliver,
Mhm.
it's going to happen.
Right.
But I know you're a big Dan fan, and it also brings you back into that like 70s AOR radio with that tape sound and that
Mm.
congealed goodness that stuff is, and it's like a old quilt and old blanket that pull up, and you're in it, and they're just so good at that. But and they all live up your way in upstate, New York, where
Yep,
you hail from. So they're
yep.
kind of, they're local heroes too, right?
Absolutely. Well, speaking of that, when we were kids, the band would play up there, outside of like a pool,
Yeah,
called, so you would just go to this place and you'd see everybody but Robbie Robertson play, and
yeah,
it was amazing. And that was your local
yeah,
band. Like you really, we got spoiled with that, having that echelon be around you, which was kind of
yeah,
a cool experience in and of itself, actually. I went to
yeah,
school with some of the kids, the
yep,
band kids. Like it's just that local thing was pretty cool about where we grew up. That was actually kind of a nice touch to it
yeah,
all. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, the Steely Dan thing, I mean, lyrically, just great lyrics for its time. Just really composition was just
yeah,
boom, you just
yep,
amazing, completely, like, to me it's night and day from like the jam band
yeah,
vibe,
yeah,
and yet it sounds like they're going out there, but it's very well,
yeah,
well organized. There was a, you probably saw this, but there was a great documentary on Asia, and they were
yeah,
talking about, yeah, just like getting to the point of absolute perfection so that then you can stretch it beyond that to sound like you're actually being loose, like that's
yep,
incredible. And that's like complete skill, and then
yep.
you go beyond to sound looser than, but it's very intentional. It's pretty great,
So that's
um,
a Zappa thing too, where he's, and I think I'm probably a bit more into the Zappa thing than you
yeah.
got into it, but it's he's similar in that it's composed music. Like he really is a composer. Um, but then with the guitar, he's completely improvisational. So
Mm.
he'll be in a very rigid and complex composition, and then he'll kind of just craft a solo live over that. And you're
Oh,
kind of like, the talent that takes to do is
yeah.
exceedingly rare, to have that kind of capability. I saw Frank once in 1984. I think he
Nice.
passed in 92. He really
Mhm.
stopped touring after like 88. So I saw, kind of like in the, final Zappa phase, and I was flabbergasted at the talent on stage. It was sick. Like each member of the band probably, and I think did go on to start other bands. You have Steve Vai and
Yep.
guitar, Chad Wackerman on drums. I mean, you have like it's just it's a stacked deck. But
Yeah.
the one thing I wasn't like prepared for, he starts the show and they go from song to song without stopping. There's no
Right.
pause. They just run one into the next. Like the one beat ends, and on the next downbeat, the next song starts. And they do this
Mm.
for 3 hours, and you're just kind of like,
Nice.
and you're talking about like changing time signatures every two measures, the whole thing. And you're like, you just realize like, wow, staggering, but it never felt coerced. It never felt rigid. It never felt, it was, it had that kind of improv feel to it. So that stuff's rare though. I struggle to think of outfits that are doing anything like that now. And it could, I'm sure they're out there. I haven't found it yet, but yeah,
Right,
it's
same. I guess
cool.
I could say the same. I haven't found it yet. And yes, I did go to a Fish show the other
Yeah.
night.
Yeah.
Great. I hadn't been in like maybe 20 years, like a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hadn't gone to Fish. Like the last time I went to Fish, I think was a New Year's show at the Madison Square Garden, like in the
Oh wow.
90s.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
hadn't seen the new Fish, the clean, tray, the anything in ages,
Yeah. Yeah.
not no bad vibe, just haven't,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so having gone the other night, it was like, oh right, truly talented. And I understand what you're saying, like if Garcia
Yeah.
and Zappa had a baby, because I mean you cannot
Yeah.
deny
Yeah.
the talented
Yeah.
of those four guys are
Yep.
powering out a lot of music, a lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
harmonies. So great.
Yep.
The lyrics are, whimsical and fun,
Yeah.
and so it's not like that Americana, brown-eyed women, in red, red, and
Yeah.
green. It's something completely different and
Yeah.
fantastical, and like Game of Thrones-ish, and but not, so very cool. And I mean, it was a throwdown. It was a party. Like it
Yeah.
was. I
Yeah.
was on the floor. I was not in the front row. I was on the floor. I was like seven row back, and they give fish people have a lot of dancing room, and so it
Oh,
was just
yeah.
this
Yeah.
like dance party, for
Yeah.
sure. And you're getting down and you're in the groove. So what's cool is that they're funky, and it
Yep.
doesn't matter if I don't know all the songs. And I knew quite a few just from songs that I knew, but some I didn't really know. And but it's I still know how to feel music, and so you can
Yeah.
still it still runs through me, when I move. So it's just
Oh,
the way
yeah.
it is. And that's the experience you can just have, just, if you have that feeling or affinity toward music, or it hits you like that. Um,
Yeah.
and again, that freedom of movement, it's just such a glorious thing.
Yeah, Fish
Um,
has a deep pocket. I think, lyrically you're right. I mean, I'd say it's their absurdist lyrics, in the
yeah,
fun as Zappa lyrics can be, that kind of level of it. But I think you can go to Fish sight unseen and have a good time. I would say that almost universally to just a
yes,
generic music fan. Like give it a try because they're gonna invite you into the music.
the
It
scene,
is
yes,
instantly you'll get something out of it. And you're right. I love that you referenced there's like a funkiness to it that just doesn't quit. I mean, deep pocket, and it's
big
definitely a black
time.
hole. I can see how people get into, way down in there with Fish. And I mean, I've definitely learned to kind of embrace what they bring. And they're still, writing, doing shows, the whole thing. I mean, I think for me that's been the lamentation of maybe with the
Mhm.
Dead and Company is just like the catalog stopped. What 80 was it 87 or 89 was the last
Yeah,
album release, so but um they did it's an incredible catalog. There's a lot of material, and so they're able to bring new interpretations of it. But yeah, it's maybe that would be my only want for Dead and Company is like, hey, put out new material, like try some new releases. But I don't know, you have to honor the canon as well, right? I mean, I think it's a tough spot to be in. It's not my band. They can do what they want. So
of course, of course. And I've gone to see a few Bob Weir and the Wolf Brothers,
yeah,
and it's just, but it's also your experiencing time through
yeah,
musicians you like. So like Bobby was, the young buck in short shorts, like ha, like
yeah, yeah,
hawking
yeah,
off like an estimated or whatever. And
yeah,
now he's the seasoned, pardon me, the seasoned cowboy,
yeah,
with his
yeah,
gray beard, and like so we've all grown in years, with this person as our sort of backdrop. So even though the Wolf Brothers is definitely a different vibe. It's slower, it's a different
yeah,
pace. The Wolf Pack having the horn section has really added something. So you have to accept that you're not going to get some fast jackstraw that you're just like, you
yeah,
can't catch your breath, but you're going to get something that's like, a ride. And like, he really does beautiful. He's been really doing well with lyrics, and like El
yeah,
Paso's have been gorgeous. And Deep Hollow, like
yeah,
going for it in the horn section, and seeing
yeah,
that. I mean, this is now going deep lyrical, like seeing the Terrapin Station with the
yeah,
suite, and they're doing the horn
yeah,
thing and the whole thing in the middle, is so much fun. It's
yeah,
really like you're seeing that entire part, which I would never have seen with Grateful Dead. So you're getting a little something different, and
yeah,
seeing Weir with the orchestra at the Kennedy Center was,
yeah.
unique,
I'll
beautiful,
bet.
very touching. Um, and so and again, like suddenly Bob Weir is like Frank Sinatra himself. He's standing
Yeah,
in a suit, crooning, days between by himself, so there's something, and that's emotional because it's like, wow, I knew this guy when he was like a little hottie at 40 something, you know what I mean, or whatever, and you had a crush on him, but now you're just seeing this man who like, so it's that, even that is, there's something really beautiful about that longevity of the
Yeah,
songbook and of the sort of, even
sure.
though the different, endeavors like Dead and Company or this or that maybe wasn't always, wasn't your Garcia lick, or it wasn't,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
it's something that carries a torch of something you love,
yeah,
and there's a
yeah.
connection to that that feels safe to me or something,
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the way you put that. No, that's right on. Well, Michelle, we've survived incredible technology challenge today.
Yes.
I mean, it's like full rebuild on your computer. I've smoked two monitors. It looks like I don't know what's going on here. Well, literally
Hey,
like a puff of
it's all
smoke
our
went up.
energy.
So
Yeah, it's all our electric energy.
yeah. So hopefully the people will forgive our somewhat disjointedness and all this. But I think, absolutely, I want to, put one more thing out there to you, like what's next on the horizon for you? Like where do you see kind of the next 5 years going for you? Is it just sail the ship forward, or do you have like a kind of master scheme of what does perfection look like for you in 5 years, 10 years?
Perfection looks like winning the lottery, but I know that's a long
Yeah.
shot. So perfection
Who's your
is
buddy?
yeah. Perfection is like, beach house and, you no longer worry about the bills. For right
Yeah.
now, it's, staying in this business. We had strikes and we had things
Yeah.
slow us down. I had a
Yep.
few things slow me down this last year. So I feel like the 5 years is just to keep on that roll. I have this dog now. I haven't had a dog in 8 years. That's kind of
Yeah.
different and fun, I guess, and a
Yeah.
handful. And just continue on this filmmaking path. I would love to someday be like, all right, that's enough. It's hard work and it's tiring and it's long hours and you sort of
Yeah.
lose your life when you're doing it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but so that would be nice to not have that, but I got to do something. So I'm going to do this for now.
Good.
And let's hope the 5 years treat me well.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I hope.
I like it. I like it. I think that's a good plan. No, sail the ship forward, and let's
Sail the ship.
let's see where things go. I mean, it's just like such curious times that we live in now. I'm with you on that. Like onwards and upwards, and hopefully better things to come, and off we go. But man, always fun to rap the music with you, and you're doing great things out there. Like I say, I mean, I'm always kind of like hats off to Manhattan people. It's
Mm.
you guys are tough fighters, whether you care to admit it or not, because it's not an easy place to be, but you earn your time there, and you're a veteran of it, so it's pretty cool to see. So yeah, we'll be watching, and let's revisit this. You get some more shows under your belt, we'll do some more debriefs on the music, and
Yes, I
you
love
do
it.
some more
I love it.
productions. We'll kind of circle the wagons, and maybe we can figure this technology out one day. Who knows?
Yeah, next time maybe we can just start and nothing will happen except a conversation.
Look, if it were easy, I guess everyone would be doing it. It's that kind of
That's
thing.
right.
So we'll
That's
we'll we'll
right.
get it figured out. But
Well, thank
awesome.
you,
Well,
Mike,
thank you.
for
Thanks for
thank you
being
for
on the
taking up.
show.
Yeah, thanks for
Go
having
take
me.
go take Junie for a stroll around the streets. Hopefully, you got a
I
little bit of light
shall.
left today and can go do that. All
Yes.
right.
All right. Thanks. Happy
All
New
right,
Year,
dude.
Mike. I'll see you.
All right.